So this presentation is looking at the audit process for auditing each other's safety management documentation. So I've identified 6 steps to go through. So the first step is you as the operator or owner of the business need to complete all the safety management system documentation. So that's the safety management plan, the supporting documents, and the doc concession. The second step is to go through do a self check or the self audit or internal audit, all the same thing, and that's explained a bit later on in this presentation. Once you've completed all the documentation, you swap it over to your auditor, and your auditor conducts the audit using the checklist. And then the auditor provides a C for complies, N for a minor non-conformity, and M for a major non-conformity. Where there is a C, there is no comment necessary, so C is complies. And then if there is a non-conformity of some sort, the auditor must provide a written description of what it is that it needs to comply with, what's missing. Once you've audited the safety management plan, support documents, and the doc concession, you hand it back to the person who you were auditing, the owner operator, and then once you've got the documentation back, you make any changes suggested by the auditor. And then the final step is submitting all that documentation to me. The person who is written all the documentation, so the owner or the operator, the last thing you do before you hand over your SMS documentation to your auditor, you complete the audit checklist. So you fill this out. So you put in here Mike's Rock Tour, that's the name of the company, and the auditor is going to be John. And then put in the date, 21st of August 2021. Now you'll see in this checklist there are 3 outcomes for each of the criteria. C is complies, N is a minor non-conformity, so something small that needs to be changed, and M is a major or NA not applicable. So we're going, as the operator or owner of the business, you're going to do the self-check or self-audit or internal audit first. So you're going to go through all of these different sections here and fill out, hopefully you're going to fill out a C, because if you put an N or an M, then you should fix that before you hand it on to your auditor. So it is a checking process for that. But the key thing is you also need to find out you need to tell the auditor where the information is, so make it easier for them to find the information that you were showing. Okay, so for example here, you've got a glossary, you've gone through it and you've seen that it's all the terms in there are correct. Right, you put a C and then you put C Appendix A, so the auditor knows immediately to go to Appendix A to check the glossary. Okay, same for business overview and hierarchy is clearly stated. So you put complies and then you show the auditor where, so you might say C section 2.2 and 2.3 for example. Okay, so you go through the whole checklist here and fill all of those out for each one of these criteria here. If some of the section points on the side here don't line up with what your template that you've developed, as you've changed some or they don't line up for whatever reason, just change the section headings here, okay, to match your documentation. So go through and fill out all the shaded bits in here and explaining where the auditor can find that information all the way through, and that includes the doc concession here at the end, and sign it down the bottom there. So that's you as the business owner or operator that you need to complete all of that before handing it to your auditor. All right, once you've finished all your safety management system documentation, so your safety management plan, your support documents, your doc concession, and your audit checklist, you've completed that, you give it to your auditor. Now I will pair your auditor up and let you know who those people are. Now as the auditor, once you've got all the documentation, you need to go through it and then use this checklist to sign off whether you think it complies, doesn't conform in a minor way, or doesn't conform in a major way. Now, minor non-conformity would be something like you disagree with the level of qualification that they have stated that the staff need. You think it should be a high level, for example. A major non-conformity would be something really big, like the hazard register is not even there at all. So as you're going through all the documentation, you complete the white area underneath the shaded area that they've already complete. So you would put here complies for the glossary, and all the terms are correct throughout that. You've seen through the documentation, nothing else needs explaining in the glossary, and you don't need to write anything in that if it all complies. If there is a non-conformity that you think needs changing, then you put an N or an M there, and then you need to write some description in here that explains to the operator or the owner of this documentation of the business what they need to do to change that to make it so it does comply. There are some of these criteria that require judgment, professional judgment, and some that don't. So for example, the document control table, which is that table at the start on about page 2 or 3 of the SMP, which tells you which version number it is, that is up to date, right? It says who completed it and a date. That is very black and white. It's there or it's not. It doesn't require judgment. Other parts of this audit checklist require some sort of judgment. So if we go down to staffing, for example, and so staff competency, currency, and qualifications that match the type of terrain and activity that company is doing does require a bit of judgment in there. So some of these criteria are easy to check off, and others require a bit more judgment. And that may mean that you need to talk to your person who's you're auditing just to clarify or sort out between the two of you to get equal, so you're on the same page. And that's exactly what happens in the real life with an auditor. You're back and forth discussing, and coming to some agreement. But generally, the auditor has the final say. And once you've gone through as the auditor through the checklist and you're happy with it, then happy with what you need to, what you've assessed, then just a general comment down the bottom here and a summary comment around what it is they need to do to, if there is anything that needs to be done to complete the audit process. And finally, just looking at the rubric or the marking schedule for the safety management system. Here it is. Here's just a couple of things to point out. So the doc concession application. So really the level of detail that someone has gone into to researching around the conservation management plan for the area that they're looking in, and to find out what are specific threats and endangered areas of historical cultural significance that have been identified. That's really the difference between an A and a C there. The safety management plan is, if you pass the audit, right, you get an A. Everyone gets an A, so that's locked in. Now, it doesn't matter whether you get your checklist back from your audit and you have nothing to change, or whether you've got 20 things to change. So long as you make all those changes and get it back and complete all the suggestions from the auditor, then you pass the audit, which is exactly the same process that happens in real life. It took us 6 months of back and forth with the auditor to get our documentation signed off by the auditor when we merged the Aoraki and the CPIT safety management plan. Okay, now, but where it um, can go wrong is in the audit process. So when you're doing your audit, if you just go through the checklist as the auditor and just tick tick or put CCC all the way through without really checking in detail all the documentation, then I get the audit checklist and I look what you've audited, and then I look at the operator that you audited, and I can see things that are missing that you haven't looked in detail. That's when you get marked down for that, and not the person who did the documentation. Okay, so that's where I can give some more details around critiquing your work of the auditing. So it's not the operator who did the missed a few things in their audit, and sorry, in their documentation. It's the auditor who, if they missed that, then I ping the person who did the audit.